The more insight we can get into what is going on within the right-wing movement and why it is becoming so anti-American and this insane split that's going on, the better. We really need to educate ourselves on this, because if we don't understand it, there is just no way that we can actually tackle it and respond to it. And I'm actually not talking about the anti-Semitism part of it. I think that's a very, very niche part. I'm talking about this new phenomena that we're seeing, in which the radicals on each side are becoming the normative voices. We're seeing the Mamdanis, who are so radically left, and we're seeing the Nick Fuentes, which are so radically right, becoming the new voices that speak for the majority, and that is wrong. Radically Rational, the name of our show and what we do here, is the idea that you have to be radically center. Have a valid opinion. Yes, I know people will say that I lean a bit more here or I lean a bit more there on different opinions, but that's fine. You're allowed to lean, but you're not supposed to place yourself in the most extreme position that you can. And there's one person who, as I've said before on this show, I genuinely think is better than anybody at tackling this. He is so coherent and he is so clear, and he truly, truly understands the depths of the issues that we are up. It is the one and only Konstantin Kisin, and this is a piece that I highly, highly recommend you watch, because I think it's total game changer in how we think about it. But first, before we play, please make sure that you have subscribed to our channel. Join us in what we're doing. We're working so hard to try and provide radically rational commentary on everything that's going on in the world, and really present a voice of reason to the people who don't have it. And if you appreciate this content, maybe somebody else will. And the only way we can get to them is if you subscribe. 85% of you have not, and I am watching. Okay, let's dive right in.
I remember reading a theory of history a long time ago, which gave a persuasive explanation for why human society seemed to repeat the same mistakes over and over. Every generation, it said, only really learns what to do, how to think, and which pitfalls to avoid from the two preceding generations with which it has direct contact. We don't learn lessons from history, we learn them from our parents and grandparents. For proof of this, if you're a man my age, you're likely to know a fair bit about World War II and almost nothing about World War I. No one watching this who is not explicitly a history nerd will know much more than the meaningless basics about the Napoleonic Wars. In other words, if history repeats itself, or at least rhymes, it is because we are repeating the mistakes of our great-grandparents, i.e. people who lived 80 to 90 years ago and could not personally warn us. As the saying goes, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, and those who do know history are doomed to watch others repeat it. This is why I think many people cannot see what is happening on the right following the split which began with the invasion of Ukraine and was wedged open by the Israel-Hamas war. The reason for this video is, of course, the unfolding events of the last few days here in the US, where I'm on a month-long recording trip. The story began when Tucker Carlson hosted Nick Fuentes on his show. Fuentes is a streamer on Rumble, where he expresses his admiration for Hitler, who he says is very cool. He asks his followers to join in chants like, "I will kill and rape for Nicholas J. Fuentes," and gives his latest takes on Jewish power in America, mixing all of this in with comments like "around blacks never relax." When Tucker invited Fuentes on for a softball interview, many on the American right, who've been privately shocked by the recent direction some in their movement have taken, began to openly murmur about whether a dangerous line had been crossed. In response, Kevin Roberts, CEO of the Heritage Foundation, whom we interviewed for Trigonometry on our last visit here, released a video in which he robustly defended Carlson against a venomous coalition which was engaging in, quote, cancellation. He pledged eternal friendship to the former Fox News anchor, while also stating that he did not agree with Fuentes' views. This attempt to pacify both sides only stirred matters further. The following day, Roberts expressed disgust at Fuentes' rhetoric and insisted that the answer was not to cancel, but to engage. The problem for Roberts is that this attempt to sit on two stools cannot work. This became exceedingly clear in his interview with Dana Loesch, throughout which Roberts repeatedly insisted that the answer to bad ideas is to engage them, while simultaneously saying that he would never host Fuentes at Heritage or on his podcast. This is an obvious contradiction that even a slick political operator like Roberts cannot resolve. It's not his fault that the generational factional conflict within the right is coming to a head. You cannot simultaneously appease people who believe in a fixed set of ideas and people who believe that the only ideas worth having are cynicism and revenge. The BoomerCon establishment does not understand that Fuentes is not the problem. He is a symptom.
Amen.
And the reason they don't understand that is that they don't understand young men, who make up the overwhelming majority of his audience. This entire phenomenon is driven by a number of factors which are affecting young men. They are the most fatherless generation in history. A quarter of Gen Z grew up without a father present, up from just 9% in 1960. They've had less male guidance and direction than any group of men in American history. Even boys born after World War II, the most murderous war in which over 400,000 American men died. They did not experience the economic prosperity or political stability of the pre-9/11 era. Buying a house, especially in America's major cities, becomes harder every year. They were educated in a school and college system which is overwhelmingly female. 77% of American school teachers are women. I don't bring this up to criticize female teachers or suggest that they're not as good as men. Many female teachers are great at teaching mathematics, music, geography, and history, but it's just harder for women to teach boys how to be men. As a result of the growing feminization of education and society at large, many young men were not taught to channel their aggression, anger, and competitiveness into productive activity. They were instead taught to suppress these natural male urges. And, as any therapist will tell you, you can't keep the things you suppress down forever. Gen Z spent their entire formative years lagging behind women in education and now earnings. Young women without children out-earn men. And for the entirety of this time, they were told that all men are trash, the future is female, and that they were to blame for every ill of humanity. It may be true that women haven't always had a fair deal in society, but that was never the fault of 15-year-old Zoomer boys who understandably bristle at being held responsible for something they neither created nor benefited from. And because they're white men, nobody cares about their problems. Is it really a surprise that some of them are resentful, angry, and openly rebellious? This perfect storm of alienation and the dearth of male guidance presents a lucrative opportunity for a new breed of influencer. Unlike fathers, uncles, male teachers, and sports coaches, Fuentes is not motivated by a desire to make a positive impact on the lives of the boys who listen to him. A father is incentivized to raise his sons in a way that makes them resist their worst instincts. As an influencer who makes money getting views online, Fuentes is incentivized to do the exact opposite. But the reason he delights in saying Hitler was very cool is not only a transgressive revolt against the puritanical gay race communism rammed down his generation's throat during the woke era and a desire for clicks. It's also because, to a generation which lacks the deeply ingrained taboo against fascism, there is no reason why fascism wouldn't be the answer. Some of their great-grandparents thought fascism was a great idea for many of the same reasons they do. Don't believe me? Look at the other side of the political spectrum. The British and American left is rapidly rediscovering its love for communism. Old ideas and old hatreds are returning across the Western world. No matter your views on illegal immigration, nobody who understands history can hear the AfD chanting Ausländer raus in Germany without feeling at least some instinctive discomfort. I've called this faction the woke right. It is a term many are desperate to argue with me about, but few deny the phenomenon I'm describing. A white identitarian movement which, like the woke left, believes in oppressor-oppressed dynamics, racial justice, and a conspiratorial force that's holding them back. On the woke left, the root of all evil was the patriarchy, imagined as a cabal of white men whose sole purpose was to deny equality to women and minorities. On the woke right, it was initially the globalists, but as I predicted in a different video, it has now evolved into simply the Jews, who are responsible for the suffering of the disadvantaged and oppressed white man. This is what people actually mean when they talk about the collapse of the post-World War II order. Shocked by the desolation caused by that war and the evils of fascism, and coming so soon after the war to end all wars, the West decided it might be a good idea to lay down some spoken and unspoken rules about what we can and can't do. One conclusion was that we let down a persecuted minority and we must never do so again. By the mid-90s, the conclusion remained, but the rationale began to slip from our collective memories. The lesson of the Holocaust became quasi-religious dogma, culminating in the deranged notion that no human is illegal. The result was mass uncontrolled immigration into every Western country for the ensuing decades. Another was the increased focus on compassion and inclusion. It's baddies like Hitler that are obsessed with strength and purity, went the logic. Therefore, we must instead embrace empathy and diversity. This is what historian Tom Holland means when he says that we no longer ask, what would Jesus do, and instead ask, what would Hitler do, and then do the opposite. These well-intended norms have now been taken to such extremes that they increasingly produce extreme results, such as open borders, legalized crime, rampant homelessness, and gender ideology. The backlash against all of this was eminently predictable, so much so that many of us have warned for many years that wokeness would produce an equal and opposite reaction on the right. How could it not? Did you really think that telling one group that they're bad because of their sex and skin color, while celebrating and promoting other groups for their sex and skin color, would not produce an identitarian backlash? In any case, Groypers, as Fuentes fans are known, are not conservatives. They are the voice of a generation which feels ignored, mistreated, and unfairly maligned. They don't want small government, they want revenge. The bulwark against this voice of Cain was shot in the neck and killed on a college campus a few weeks ago. Charlie Kirk was single-handedly leading the Zoomer right away from bitterness and resentment, towards God, family, and service. How and whether the remaining principled conservatives try to resolve this attempt to take over their movement remains to be seen. If you enjoy these videos, remember they're available at...
Guys, I didn't interrupt that for a second because I think his coherency is very important. You have to watch the entire thing and clock it. But this is what's important for us to remember. Number one, that history teaches us stuff. And I think as an Orthodox Jew, I connect to this idea a lot. If you look at the patterns of what works and what doesn't, then you will learn what now works and what doesn't. It's just a very entitled generation that believes that none of the past has any relevance to us, and we're just stuck here trying to figure it out. There is very clear patterns. There are patterns of anti-Semitism, patterns of extremism, patterns across the entire history that if we look at them and we understand them, everything becomes clear in how to respond. But what I really think here is interesting is two other things that he said, or a few other things. Number one, we'll talk about the extremism. How if you're going to create extremism on one side and respond to it in an extreme way, it creates extremism on another side. I think the fact that he mentions how much we've let down our young men is unbelievably important. And I think it's really, again, important to recognize that when you look at people like Nick Fuentes, and when you look at this phenomena, it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's actually nothing to do with the Jews. Most of the stuff we're seeing right now is actually nothing to do with the Jews. It's a psychological reaction to a very, very messed up state. There are young men out there who have been told that they are pathetic and revolting and the least important people in society, which is not the case. Our men are probably our most important people in society to prop up because they defend us and they protect us and they lead the way that the world moves forward. And we've forgotten them, and we've not paid proper attention to them. And the one person who was doing that was Charlie Kirk, who instead of presenting options like Nick Fuentes, which is be revengeful, be angry, love people like Hitler, who had just such intense control over the world, be a good person, be a good dad. That's where your energy should go. That's where your revolt should be. And I think that's a big part of why, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, all of this is exploding so intensely. It's happening because Charlie was really the defender against what he knew was a mammoth beast of the young men in America and across the world who are so sick and tired of not being seen and of not being accepted. And they're looking for things to blame. And a big easy thing to blame is the Jews, because the Jews are often blamed, but it's not about their blame on us, it's about how society has let them down. And in many ways, everything that we're seeing is interconnected. And until we recognize that and start to try and ask ourselves, not how do we respond from our gut with frustration and with anger, but how do we actually see what the problem is so we can solve the problem? The fact that Konstantin brings up female teachers is interesting. It would seem a very niche point when trying to deal with the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes debate. But really what he's saying here is there are many other factors that need fixing and shifting and changing, and we have a responsibility to all of them, to understand them and to try and heal them, because if not, we're just going to end up jumping from extremism to extremism and never learning the lessons. Right now, it feels like we are in the midst of not having learned our lesson, and that's heartbreaking. And that's the rise of Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. It is not a group of people who are trying to be the moral leaders of the world. It is a group of people who are angry, frustrated, and they want, as Konstantin said, revenge. And that's a scary thing, and that's a scary phenomena. But it's a phenomena that's not going to be treated by us saying, oh, Nick Fuentes is a bad person. It's going to be treated by us trying to figure out how we can speak to that frustration of the youth and how we can actually give them some power back. Why do they hate Israel? Why do the Gen Zers hate Israel so much? Well, it's not actually, there's two different types of groups, right? You've got the left, and that's because they're so pro-Palestinian, they believe all this fascist, ridiculous things. But here, it's the group of people that believe that their lives have been ruined so badly by this elitist that try and control them. And who is that elitist? Well, instead of admitting that it's their parents or it's their schools, what they're looking for is the big thing, the thing behind the scenes, and that ends up being the Jews, and so they hate us. Again, it's not justifiable, and Semitism is never really going to be justifiable, but it's much, much deeper. And when we try and tackle just the symptom, like, no, don't like it, don't hate us Jews, we're actually good, we're missing the point. There is a generation here that has been let down and has been betrayed in the most extreme way, and we have to figure out how to solve that and how to heal that. And that was something that Charlie Kirk was doing. He was talking to this youth and reminding them that they have an obligation to be family men and God men and good parents, good husbands, to go out there and to make money and to pay on every single date. And he was taking that anger and he was channeling it. Nick Fuentes is channeling it a different direction. And it's not for nothing that they say that Nick is looking like he's going to be the replacement of Charlie, because this anger can go one way or another. And with Charlie's death, the dams have opened. And we have a lot of work to do, my friends. Thank you for your attention to this matter.